FOSDEM, the largest free and open source software conference in Europe, drawing over 8,000 last I checked attendees annually. This conference is absolutely huge. They have canceled a keynote presentation planned to be given by the founder of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, after a threat of a protest. And I'm not making this up. This is the actual thing. This is the actual story. After a threat of a protest by a child pornography enthusiast and extreme leftist who previously had attacked Richard Stallman, the founder of the Free Software Foundation. This is an absolutely real thing that's happening, and it's crazy. I'm going to walk you through this real quickly so you know exactly what's going on. So this weekend, February 1st and 2nd, taking place in Brussels, is FOSDEM, the Free and Open Source Developers European Meeting is what it stands for. But it's essentially a many thousands of users and developers event for companies, enthusiasts, and whatnot related to Linux, open source software, and whatnot, all descend on Brussels and have just a giant conference. Now, in that conference, as they do every year, they have a large number of keynote presentations. I think last I checked, there was 10, 11, 12 keynote presentations planned for this year's FOSDEM, all taking place this weekend. One of them was by Jack Dorsey, the guy who created Twitter, also known as Hipster Rasputin. If you've ever seen him in his long hair, he looks like Rasputin. This is all I'm saying. The title of this particular keynote was Infusing Open Source Culture into Company DNA, a conversation with Jack Dorsey and Manik Sirtani, Block's head of open source. Okay, I'm going to be honest, it doesn't sound all that interesting to me. But it sounds pretty in line with what most keynotes at most of these tech conferences sound like. A little bit of jargon, a little bit of throw the word DNA in there somewhere, and bam, you've got a keynote presentation. It sounds kind of boring, but it sounds like the kind of thing that companies want to do. Well, that got a reaction from a gentleman named Drew DeVault. Now, Drew DeVault posted a blog post entitled No Billionaires at FOSDEM, and he said the following. Jack Dorsey, former CEO of Twitter, ousted board member of Blue Sky, and grifter extraordinaire to the tune of $5.6 billion net worth, is giving a keynote at FOSDEM. Some of the challenges, let's see, blah, 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 blah. Skip along a little bit. Here we go. After Dorsey sold Twitter to Elon Musk, selling the platform out to the far right for a crisp billion with a B dollar payout, the FOSS community shouldered the burden, the free and open source software community, both with our labor and our wallets, of massive exodus onto our volunteer-operated servers, especially from victims fleeing the hate speech and harassment left in the wake of the sale. 2 years later, one of the principal architects of and beneficiaries of that disaster will step onto the same stage. Even if our community hadn't been directly harmed by Dorsey's actions, I don't think that we owe this honor to someone who took $1 billion to ruin their project, ostracize their users, and destroy the livelihoods of almost everyone who worked on it. Dorsey is presumably being platformed at this keynote presentation because his blockchain beep company is a main sponsor of FOSDEM this year, end quote. All right, now I need to give you a little bit of background here. Now, clearly this gentleman, Drew DeVault, is very upset that Jack Dorsey has so much money, and he doesn't think that people who have that much money should get a keynote at this gigantic conference. He also is very upset at far-right groups and Elon Musk and what Twitter has become and all that sort of thing. But who exactly is Drew DeVault? Well, Drew DeVault wrote this last October a hit piece on Richard Stallman. This is probably the biggest thing he's done that's garnered him press attention at this point. And this hit piece on Richard Stallman was long-winded. It was really long-winded, and it was more than a little crazy. Richard Stallman being the founder of the Free Software Foundation, the Free Software Movement, the guy behind the GNU software license and whatnot. And Richard Stallman's a bit of a nutty guy in his own right, but this hit piece crafted by Drew DeVault was a bit crazy. Now, initially, Drew DeVault tried to stay anonymous with his hit piece on Richard Stallman, but the Lunduke Journal figured out who wrote it, outed him, and we had a whole thing about that back in last October. Now, a few weeks after that, things started to get a little interesting because people were wondering, what's the deal with this Drew DeVault guy? And so a lot of people started internet sleuthing around and seeing what all this Drew DeVault guy does. Well, it turns out he has a years and years long track record of collecting, commenting on, distributing, and writing software to work with child pornography. That's not a joke. That's not an unsubstantiated rumor. That's an extraordinarily well documented fact at this point. He's an extreme leftist who is heavily involved in child pornography, particularly animated child pornography. So drawings of little girls in and little boys in very sexual things. This resulted in something called the DeVault report, which you can get at dmpwn.info, which goes into all of it, and it's too long to go into now, but suffice to say it has an absolutely off the charts amount of screenshots, details, links, and evidence showing Drew DeVault being heavily interested in child pornography. It's rather disgusting. And by the way, not refuted by Drew DeVault at all. After all of this came about, Drew DeVault deleted his social media presence and just kind of disappeared more or less back into his blog, and that's it. And no one really was hearing from Drew DeVault since then. Well, that all changed on January 16th when he came out with an attack on Jack Dorsey. Now, I don't know Jack Dorsey. I'm no friend of Jack Dorsey's, but he really doesn't like Jack Dorsey, so he came out against him. And he declared that they were going to hold on, let me see if I can get this up here so I can show you exactly what they're planning. In my opinion, in my view, he says, billionaires are not welcome at FOSDEM. Okay, so billionaires, if you have too much money, you cannot go to this conference. He goes on to say, quote, I do not want to platform Jack Dorsey on this stage. To that end, I'm organizing a sit-in in which I and anyone who will join me are going to sit ourselves down on the keynote stage during his allocated time slot and peacefully prevent the talk from proceeding as scheduled, end quote. All right, so their plan was to hold a protest, right? He was going to schedule a protest. Who's with me, he says, and he's going to go sit on the stage that Jack Dorsey was going to speak on and prevent the keynote from happening. So it wasn't like an across the street protest. It was a stop it from happening, occupy the space sort of protest. That was what he was going for. Now, FOSDEM, the organizers of this conference, responded. A statement on planned protests during the upcoming FOSDEM 2025. We were made aware of planned protests during the upcoming FOSDEM 2025 in response to a scheduled talk, which is causing controversy. They never specifically say the details there, right? The talk in question is claimed to be on the schedule for sponsorship reasons. Additionally, some of the speakers scheduled to speak during this talk are controversial to some of our attendees. To be clear, in our 25-year history, we have always had the hard rule that sponsorship does not give you preferential treatment for talk selection. This policy has always applied. It applied in this particular case, and it will continue to apply in the future. Any claims that any talk was allowed for sponsorship reasons are false. I can't. By the way, I can't refute or support that statement. That seems reasonable. If you have a large conference and someone with as high a stature as Jack Dorsey is offering to do a keynote, it does seem like you'd be inclined to allow them to do it because it's going to get you a lot of press attention. Most keynotes scheduled for FOSDEM don't get a whole lot of attention outside of the event itself, but a Jack Dorsey keynote might, and so I can see why FOSDEM might want that, regardless of whether or not his company was sponsoring any portion of the event. Anyway, I continue. At FOSDEM, we have always allowed and welcomed protest, even when that protest was directed at the organization or one of our sponsors. Open source and free software are inherently political, and as such, it is normal and expected that our attendees are more vocal about the wider world, and FOSDEM in particular. As such, if a peaceful protest were to take place during the talk in question, we will not take action, provided the protest is indeed peaceful and does not disrupt the proceedings. We would appreciate if anyone organizing a protest would contact us in advance at this email address so we can ensure that we are able to meet our crowd control and fire safety obligations, end quote. All right, honestly, it's a fairly reasonable response. They're not going to stop protests, but you can't prevent or disrupt what's happening. So that was going to be the sticking point, right? Because the whole point of this protest was that they were going to sit on the stage and stop it. They were specifically going to disrupt the proceedings. Well, FOSDEM caved. This is, let me show you before and after. This is the page on the on FOSDEM.org, FOSDEM.org, specifically for the keynote presentation in question. And this is it now. Resource not found. The resource you requested does not exist. It just has been obliterated from the schedule. They nuked that entire keynote off of the calendar from orbit. It doesn't appear like any other scheduled presentations or keynotes were removed, just this one. The Lunduke Journal reached out to FOSDEM organizers, have not heard back yet for confirmation on this or reasonings why this is. Was this canceled by request of Jack Dorsey? Was he just like, you know what, if they're going to protest, I don't want to be there? Was it canceled by FOSDEM organizers? Was it canceled by the venue organizers? Is this just a weird bug? Like what's going on here? Wasn't able to get any sort of response. In light of any sort of statement, you have to assume at the very least it was intentional. Whatever the motivations were, it was clearly intentional. It's probably not a bug. It doesn't seem to be affecting any other presentations on the calendar. Now, of course, Drew DeVault, the child porn enthusiast and extreme leftist, is very excited about this. He posted on his blog post yesterday evening, "Good news! It appears that Jack Dorsey's FOSDEM talk has been canceled. I say it appears so because there has been no official statement from anyone to that effect." He's right. There hasn't been an official statement, but it does appear that that it was canceled. He then goes on to talk about how great this is and how wonderful it is that Jack Dorsey is being censored. So that's good. He goes on to say at the very end, "Let's do something useful with that now empty time slot. Anyone who planned to attend the protest is encouraged to come anyway on Sunday at noon," which is where when the keynote was planned to be held, "where we're going to talk amongst ourselves and anyone else who shows up." So they're planning to get together, or at least this guy is. Anyone who else wants to get together with the child porn enthusiast guy, they're going to get together on that stage where the keynote was going to be held and talk about FOSDEM, about the conference, about all that sort of thing. Now, I want to show you guys this because they had flyers made up for the protest, and they're very, I don't know, they're very Antifa style posters. No billionaires, and they shared them because they were really proud of their Antifa style posters. And they don't want them to go to waste. No billionaires at FOSDEM, it says, with Jack Dorsey with his big old beard and an X logo over his mouth. Join the sit-in protest. Meet outside of Jansen, which is the hall that the keynote was going to be at, Sunday at 11:45 a.m. to occupy the stage during Jack Dorsey's slot. The FOSDEM community want to platform people who were complicit in Twitter's far-right takeover. Jack Dorsey walked away with $1 billion from the sale of Twitter to Elon Musk, putting the platform at the disposal of the far right and contributing to the rise of hate, harassment, violence, and terror around the world. Oh, wow. This drove thousands to flee to the Fediverse, externalizing thousands of dollars in costs to our volunteer communities. Externalizing costs. What's interesting is, until this event, all of the people in the Fediverse, right, a open source distributed, basically Twitter clone, but it's like with multiple servers and whatnot, were super excited about all the people leaving Twitter, right? And there weren't that many people. I mean, most Twitter usage actually grew, but a lot of people did, thousands of people that were just extreme leftists moved off onto Mastodon and the Fediverse and those other social networks. That did happen. And they were excited about that. Super excited about that. Until now. Until they can twist the story to be an entirely new narrative. So while it was great and exciting that it was happening yesterday, today it's horrible because there's so much cost involved with running servers and, everybody's fleeing in terror. They're all going to die if they're on X. It's a bit extreme. They also talk about how Elon laid people off, and that's Jack Dorsey's fault. So Jack Dorsey should, be burned at the stake or something. And they also talk about how he profited from climate change and money laundering because Jack Dorsey likes Bitcoin and artificial intelligence. It's fascinating. It's fascinating how all of this comes together. What the really crazy thing to me is that FOSDEM, it appears, caved. Right? Now, I would like to hear from either FOSDEM or Jack Dorsey on this. I've reached out to both of them because there's a possibility that Jack Dorsey was just like, forget it, forget it. If there's all this hubbub, I don't want to deal with it. I'm Jack Dorsey. I have a lot of money. I've got stuff to do. I don't need to deal with it. Right? That's an entirely possible thing. If, however, it is true that FOSDEM caved, that means that a very small amount of pressure from an extreme leftist with a track record of attacking free software personalities, rather ridiculously and with crazy statements, who has a multi-year long, well-published, well-documented, and publicly well-understood habit of collecting and distributing child pornography. A very small amount of pressure from that sort of person, the sort of person that should have no influence over any organization ever, managed to get FOSDEM, the largest conference of its kind, with close to 10,000 attendees last I checked, getting close to it, to cave and cancel one of the largest names to ever speak at their conference. Whether you like Jack Dorsey or not, he's a big name. They managed to get them to cancel his appearance, his keynote presentation, because of a small amount of pressure. Crazy to me. Absolutely crazy to me. That boggles my mind. I'm not gonna lie. And what's really wild here is there are other bits of presentations that are being minorly protested, and I'm hoping that things go a little bit more calmer with all of these. For example, many of you will recall earlier in the month, I had several shows around Open Mandriva, a Linux distribution that was decidedly not political, right? They came out as not political, not woke, not extreme anything. They were a software project focused entirely on the software, right? And after those initial shows came out, the Open Mandriva project saw some extra success because of it, because so many people are just tired of extreme politics being injected into the software world. And so they're like, well, yeah, I want to check this out. If there's a non-woke, non-political project where anyone can be involved based purely on merit, yeah, I want to check that out. Well, people over on Mastodon, you hear this over and over again, it's where the crazies hang out, started yelling about that, specifically because the president of that project, of Open Mandriva, had reached out to me. And that person was also going to be speaking at FOSDEM on an unrelated project, on an Android open source project. That they were, quote, if you are queer and will be attending FOSDEM, I would probably avoid this one, because that particular presentation. Now, what's interesting about this is that the individual giving the presentation, the president of Open Mandriva, never made any statements about anything queer related. No statements at all to me or anyone else that I'm aware of relating to trans issues, LGB issues, Q issues, the plus issues, any of it, right? I don't think there's been a statement, right? However, they view the Open Mandriva project as not political. Therefore, it means it is not extreme leftist. Therefore, they must attack. So they're going to try and get people to avoid this open source Android presentation because that person spoke to Lunduke. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane that this sort of thing is going on at all. I wonder how. You know what? I'm going to leave it at that. I have lots of things I wonder. This is truly crazy. To the FOSDEM organizers, to Jack Dorsey and Jack Dorsey's team at Block, if you could reach out to me and let me know, or just make a public statement that I can read from, what the reason is for this particular keynote being canceled. Was it by request of Jack? Was it from the FOSDEM organizers? What was it? What caused it to happen? That would be beneficial to know, because as it stands right now, it appears like the FOSDEM organizers side with child pornography enthusiasts and extreme leftists who say that people with a lot of money should not be allowed to speak at technology conferences. That's what it looks like, and that's creepy and crazy and weird. I would like to thank everyone who subscribes to the Lunduke Journal wherever you do so. Go to lunduke.com. There's links there where you can watch and listen to the show on iTunes and Spotify and Substack and Fountain and the audio podcast RSS feeds. You can watch the show on Locals and Rumble and X, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Patreon, seriously. And you can even download DRM-free MP4 files of every episode of this show. You can just download them. What other show can you go to and be like, I want to watch this YouTuber. Okay, I'm going to click the download MP4 link. Oh, wait, they don't do that. They don't offer that. I do. Just straight up. No, you don't have to work around some things where you use a funny script to download a thing off YouTube. No, I'm just providing you with the MP4 file. Here you go. Back it up. Watch it on whatever device you want. Watch it whenever you want. Back it up and watch it 100 years from now. Enjoy. And I want to thank everyone who subscribes via Locals, Substack, or Patreon or Itch, because those of you who subscribe financially, tossing in a couple of dollars here and there, you manage to keep the Lunduke Journal rocking. You make it so that the Lunduke Journal can be the last bastion of truly independent tech journalism on planet Earth. We are ad-free, big tech free, and audience supported entirely by you. So thank you. Couldn't do it without you. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.